The raw diet completely changed my life. This book, The Primal Diet We Want to Live by Arjunus Vonderplanitz. I just want to say that it's an absolutely incredible book. I also want to say that the story that the book starts with is absolutely remarkable. How he completely healed his son, who was going through, tragedy, who was going through absolutely a traumatic experience, and with the help of the raw primal diet, that being raw meat, raw butter, raw milk, raw honey, and all of those beautiful nutrients and enzymes and minerals and the beneficial bacteria. This man right here, he healed his son. He saved his son's life. Not only his son's life, but he saved quite a few people's lives, I mean, hundreds and hundreds. And he brought hundreds of individuals to levels of, healthy hormones, healthy testosterone, healthy DHT. He taught them about the dangers of synthetic foods, synthetic drinks, synthetic forms of hydration, synthetic forms of clothing fabrics, synthetic, electromagnetic pollution. He was actually one of the first people to really put people's eyes on electromagnetic pollution and talk to them about the dangers of synthetic vibrations and frequencies, and talking about how this whole world is completely electric. And he was one of the first guys actually to pioneer the EMF meters and, the tri-field meter, and talk about how important it is to carry one of those around, and he was talking about how electromagnetic pollution affects the body. He was one of the first people to do this. He was in the late 1900s, he was talking about this, and so shout out to this man. Now, I've been doing the raw primal diet for 6.5 months now. I've been doing it, and that has been consisting of, it's not completely raw and primal because I do eat potatoes, but I have been eating raw meat, raw beef tallow, raw milk, raw cheese now for 6.5 months, and I have to say I feel absolutely fantastic. I've got so much energy, I don't even know what to do with myself. I'm 25 years old and I feel like I'm 16 again. I'll just say that much. I've only been old in the realm 25 years, but I feel like I'm 16 again. I've got so much energy, I literally have no idea what to do with myself. I'm training twice a day and just having an absolute blast. I'm completely 100% aware and in the present moment, and I'm as sharp as a cat. I'll tell you that much, as sharp as a jungle cat. Like you see the tiger and the jaguar and the lion and all these animals in the jungle, and they're all on the raw diet as well, aren't they? And they are as sharp as can be and as vigilant as can be, and I am comparing myself with that. Now, I just want to talk about the raw primal diet for anybody maybe who's interested in it or who's taken a look at it previously and wants to, give it a go. And I want to be I just want to make sure that everybody knows that I am a huge supporter of this diet, a huge supporter of the work that this man has done, Arjunus Vonderplanitz. If nobody's heard of this man yet, I suggest that you just type his name on YouTube, because he's got lectures, he's got teaching schedules, he's got programs, he's got nutrition plans, there's so much of this man's content online, and I recommend that everybody, take the time, go onto YouTube and, just type in this man's name, and there are so many videos and, so many little short clips where he's talking about, these different tribes, and I'm going to talk about that as well. at the moment. So, first of all, I want to talk about raw meat. And in the beginning, I wasn't really sure about it. He was talking about it in one of his lectures, and it was really interesting, man. And he's such a funny, compassionate guy. He's like, he was talking about the benefits, and so I did it. I started just eating a few little pieces. I was just eating a few little pieces, and I remember being in my kitchen and I was like, goodness me, what on earth am I doing? And I just remember the feeling, I just remember what I know. I know that it invigorated me. It completely invigorated me. Just eating a few pieces, and I was like, there's no way I'm cooking the rest of the meat, because it's just completely invigorated me. I'm aging backwards. That's the best way to describe it. I'm completely aging backwards. Now, I've done a lot of research on the benefits of raw meat, so I thought it's very important to go through the benefits, the actual benefits that have been backed up by, nutritionists, not only backed up by nutritionists and homeopaths, but just going through the tribes and stuff like that, all these things that the tribes used to do. And I'm going to go through all these different tribes, and I'm going to go through the benefits. So first of all, we're going to start with raw meat. The first benefit, which I'm sure every single man can agree with, is that you don't have to cook. There's no more cooking. Your life simplifies by 100%. It completely simplifies. You don't have to cook anymore. There's no more washing up. There's no more, getting the pots and pans out and heating stuff up. There's none of that anymore, and your life completely simplifies. That's absolutely amazing. No more cooking. You don't need to cook your eggs. You don't need to cook your meat. You don't need to cook anything anymore, and you can just eat it completely. Another benefit, you are taking in because the meat has not been cooked and it hasn't been heated up, you are absorbing 100% of the nutrients. It's absolutely incredible. You're absorbing every single nutrient in the food. It's not been heated up, and the structure of the food has not been changed. And remember, when you're getting meat, you want 100% grass-fed, grass-finished, non-frozen, fresh, farm-raised meat. You want the highest quality meat. Never, ever settle for less. Never, ever settle for less. Isn't that right, Adonis? And make sure that you're getting the highest quality, guys. Now, another benefit of it, you're absorbing all of the nutrients. You don't have to cook. Another benefit is that the meat digests within 15 to 20 minutes. It digests so quickly. It doesn't even take that long to digest. It satiates you. You're not constantly eating all the time. This is another amazing thing. You're not eating all the time, and you're not overeating, and you're getting exactly the right amount of nutrients that your body needs. You don't have to track anymore, depending on your goals, but you are eating the healthiest food ever. When it comes to raw meat, you're receiving all of the beneficial enzymes, the beneficial bacteria, the beneficial minerals, the nutrients. No more need for there's no more need for synthetic vitamins, synthetic tablets, synthetic capsules, synthetic, pharmaceuticals. You don't need any of those things anymore, because raw meat's giving you all the micronutrients, the macronutrients, and, it's digesting so quickly, as I just said previously. Comes to like a masculine level. When it comes to the masculine level, yeah, you are on such a higher level of testosterone, on such a higher level of DHT. Your hormones are completely in balance. Not only are they in balance, but it's like they are becoming completely overloaded with testosterone. You are going to have higher energy levels, higher concentration levels. Your athletic performance is going to be absolutely through the roof. You're going to have higher strength, higher flexibility, higher speed, higher stamina. You are going to be able to perform better. You're going to have to be able to perform longer. That's just absolutely incredible. That's a huge benefit. As I was doing my research and I was looking into raw meat, I started realizing that every single ancient tribe, every single ancient culture, ancient background, ancient tribe, they all ate raw meat, and that is coming from every single one. I started researching the Eskimo tribe, who completely survive on raw milk and raw meat. That's all they eat. They don't change anything. It's raw meat and raw milk. The Maasai tribe, who are just, they are a tribe, and they are so genetically, you can just see them when you look at them, how genetically gifted they are. They're so tall and so beautiful and so strong, the Maasai tribe, and all they eat is raw meat and raw milk. They're absolutely incredible. Another tribe is Native Americans. When you look into the Native Americans and you look into their diet, you know, for some reason, I don't know why, the mainstream media trying to make it look like that they've grown up on plants and they've grown up on veggies and fruits, but that's not the case at all. The Native Americans eat primarily raw butter, raw meat, raw milk. That's it. They literally don't eat anything else. And raw fish. They eat completely 100% raw fish. Another cool thing that these tribes do, I was researching about Germany and how in ancient times and not so recently in the 1900s, Germans were eating raw meat. But what they did was they came up with this different technique. They would take the meat. This is the tribes as well. Now, this is the Eskimos, the Maasai tribe, the Germans, and the Native Americans. They would take a piece of meat and they would let it sit. They would let it completely sit on the counter or sit outside on the grass, because the tribes are outside, and they would leave it there for 24 hours and the meat would become fermented. The meat would ferment, and they would call it high meat because it would completely invigorate them. It was absolutely incredible. They would have energy on a level that was like nothing they've ever seen before. They would call it high meat because not only were they super relaxed, they were in their super, and that's the natural state for human beings to be. They were in a natural awareness state. They were relaxed. They had a super high energy. That's just the best way to describe it, because that's exactly what I'm experiencing right now. I know I'm experiencing it right now. And, you know, it made them more present, and it just gave them, you know, all the men were like this, you know what I mean? And men are not like this anymore. The raw meat diet is going to make men like this. And, you know, they would allow it to ferment, and that was just absolutely amazing. They would allow it to ferment, and what would happen is the meat, it would change color. The structure of it would change, but not in a good way. It would actually age. It's like the aging process, the same as like how fruit ferments and it becomes wine. So they would ferment the meat, and it would be on another level. That's like an upgrade. You can do raw meat and then you can go to fermented meat. That's just another important thing to throw in there. And then of course you've got the Greeks, you've got the Italians, you've got the French. They all had raw meat. That's why all the men, everyone back in the day, they were so jacked, because nobody was cooking the food and stuff like that. And the stove and the pans and stuff like that, those were all rolled out by Rockefeller in the 1900s, early 1900s and stuff. It was kind of like an MK Ultra mind programming technique. They started rolling out stoves, they started rolling out pans and stuff like that, and they started tricking people because nobody ever used to cook the meat. If you watch how the tribes live, that's exactly how the human race used to live and how they used to eat meat. And what they're going to try and do is they're going to try and convince you that the tribes never used to eat meat, because what they do is, we've got Billy Boy Gates going into different tribes now, going into Maasai tribe, Eskimo tribe, Native American tribes, invading those tribes and trying to get them to change their diet. You see, there's been a lot of flip-flops. They've even shipped people there. You know, big companies are shipping people there. So now they're always inverting stuff. So always remember that. Anything that Big Harmer is telling you to do, always make sure that you do the opposite and you'll be absolutely fine. He actually said that, by the way. He actually said that. Anything that a big mainstream outlet is telling you to do the opposite and you'll be fine. If you do the opposite, 99% of the time, you'll be fine. That's a quote from this man. Absolutely amazing, this guy. Another two people that I want to mention are actually the Mexicans and the Swedish. Because if you go to Sweden, if everybody's ever been to Sweden, there are areas where there are people that they just eat the food raw, completely raw. They actually have markets in Sweden. They have markets in Sweden where they have, they're actually raw meat and raw fish markets. They just sell it like that. I'm sure they've got restaurants and stuff. I'm not sure if it's America or if it's Sweden. They've got restaurants, and in Italy as well, and Greece, they've got restaurants where they serve the food completely raw. There's steak carpaccio, there's sashimi, there's steak tartare, there's sushi. There's so many raw dish recipes, and it's quite funny that actually, because it's called steak tartare, that takes you back to Tartaria. You know, that's where the name came from, because Tartarians is another topic that you have to get into, because they used to eat raw meat. They actually used to carry it in a leather satchel. They used to carry it in a leather satchel, and nobody really knows this because they've been completely wiped off the timeline, but Tartarians used to eat raw meat. They used to eat completely raw meat and raw milk, and they would allow the meat to ferment. They would have a leather satchel in their bag. They would have a leather satchel, and they would allow that meat to ferment, and they would eat it. And just remember, the Native Americans, okay, there are some studies where I found that Native Americans lived till 200 years old, and the Tartarians lived till 300 years old. So just remember, when they're trying to remove meat, raw milk, raw honey, raw butter, raw cream, raw cheese, when they're trying to remove that, they are trying to remove the truth from you. So just try and look into all the things that they are trying to remove. That's what this man said. Try and look into all the things that they're trying to remove. Do your research into it. And when you look at the things that they're trying to remove and the agenda behind it, you'll find the truth. And then you'll get to. And when people start asking themselves and looking for the truth, they're going to end up where I am. Another benefit that raw meat has, and this is absolutely incredible, is how much it relaxes the brain and the central nervous system and all the organs in the body. You see, people are they're in like what I call a schism state, a contradicting state. They're going back and forth like a pendulum, you know, like a bit of a seesaw. They're in a constant battle with polarity. I would say that raw meat is absolutely beautiful for people who want to kind of leave that polarity and enter a Zen state where there is no cause and effect, there is no polarity, there is no back and forth. And you know what I mean? They have completely elevated and expanded their level of awareness. That is one other thing that raw meat does. You're just in a complete Zen state. Everything is completely natural. Everything, your attention is completely focused in the heart chakra, and you are just knowing and acting. That's it. You're in a state of knowing and taking action. Just to end the video, I just want to say, anybody who is doing the raw meat, the raw primal diet, which this man mentioned right here, if anybody's doing the raw primal diet, they have to also know is that how much it kind of pulls out the things from the body. That's also another really important thing that people have to understand, because it pulls out things like chemicals, it pulls out things like toxins, it pulls out things like poisons, it pulls out things like, you know, metals and plastics. You know, a lot of people talk about microplastics and how human beings are consuming, you know, a credit card a day in plastic, or I think it's about 5 credit cards a week now. I don't know what the latest study was talking about when it came to plastics and metals. But when you stop cooking the food, there's less metal going into the food. Obviously, there's no plastic now going into the food, because you're not having to reheat it in a plastic container. You don't have to put it in a microwave. It's not getting zapped. So going raw actually makes you less vulnerable to electromagnetic pollution, a plastic overload, a metal overload, all those things like that, you know, and it's really, really healthy. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope this kind of educated you on how beneficial the raw meat diet is. It's completely changed my life. That's what's going to be the title of this video. The raw primal diet changed my life, you know, and I recommend anybody try it for 2 weeks or a month and just see how you feel. Your heart is always going to tell you the truth, guys, you know. So follow your heart, remember. A lot of people, the problem is too many people follow the mind, and the mind is just the matrix mainframe, you know. You're completely programmed if you're following that. Thank you so much guys, and have a great day.